Hey, ladies, welcome to another Self-Love Conversations. My name is Gloria Ward, and tonight we're going to talk about something that's is near and dear to my heart, and that is about grief and also loss, and especially when you actually lose your mom. And we have the amazing Shameka Williams. This is exactly what she do. She helps people navigate through their grief. She's an entrepreneur, she's a speaker, and I just can't wait to hear what she has to say because Shameka, we have a lot in common. So thank you so much for being here.
Well, thank you for the invite. I'm excited to be here. I'm excited to talk to you and talk to your audience.
So the first thing I want to know is just like basically your story. Mine, I lost my mother at 7. She died of AIDS, and it was 6 of us. So my grandmother raised us from the ages of 2 to 16.
Okay.
So I already, I could kind of tell what some of that stuff feels like when you lose a parent at such a young age.
Yeah.
But what is your story?
Yeah. I lost my mom. I was 23. I think I was 23.
Hmm.
But much like you, of course, I was raised by my mother, but I had a very close relationship to my grandmother as well. So
Right.
really what happened was I didn't even realize that I was still grieving my mother, I mean my grandmother when I lost my mother, right?
Mm.
And I lost my grandmother when I was in my first year of college. Um, and I was in class one day and my dad came and kind of took me out of class. And I lived in Baltimore and I went to school in Scranton, Pennsylvania. So it was a 5-hour drive. So I said, something had
Wow.
to happen.
Something happened. Yeah.
5 hours is a
If
long
you
time
come
to
into
be
the school,
to the school. You don't like when you see your parents at school.
hey, the first thing you
Um,
like, oh shit,
oh
what
yeah,
happened?
so he pulled me to the side and he put me in the chapel and told me that my grandmother passed away. Um, and I think that was one of the first instances of loss that I ever experienced. And I didn't realize what it was at the time. And also, I think a lot of it is also that I had never encountered it before. So I think if you've never encountered loss, you really don't know what it is, what it entails. Like you're just like, okay,
Mhm.
somebody died, that's sad, but what does this mean for me? And so I went down kind of a path of, if I'm honest, self-destructive behaviors. I was still living life, but it wasn't the same, right?
Mhm.
And then, as life went on, I actually got kicked out of school because I wasn't doing well. I couldn't
Mhm.
concentrate, but of course, at the time, I didn't realize what was happening. I was just
Right,
like, I'm out here,
right,
Um,
right,
and then I end up coming back home and I went back to school and all that good stuff. But really, um, I was out there, and then my mom got diagnosed with breast cancer. And when my mom got diagnosed with breast cancer, I never thought that, oh, she's gonna die. I never thought that.
right, right.
Um, my mom was my superwoman. So even after my grandmother died, I was like, no, she's gonna be good. And my mother, when she passed away, was a minister. So I'm a PK. So my father
Yeah,
is an elder, my mother was a minister. So I'm like, oh, God got her. Like, I don't got to worry about it. She's a
yeah,
good person.
yeah.
And, come to find out, it was aggressive and she was fine. She had had a surgery that really helped and they was like, she's good. And then one day she was good. I had moved into my own apartment for the first time. I was like excited. And then I got the call like, hey, you need to come see your mother. And this was on
Mm.
Valentine's Day. So Valentine's Day was challenging for me because that was the last time I saw my mother actually alive, right?
Right, right.
And at that point, I realized your mother may not make it. And she didn't. We had to make the
Mhm.
decision about whether or not to pull the plug on her.
Mhm.
And that was one of the hardest things that I've ever done. But I think it was also hard because my mother was a very private person. So my
Right,
mother had brothers. She had 4 brothers. She didn't let us tell them that she had cancer.
of course.
So we were supporting her kind of on, my dad, thank God for him. He was in there in the trenches, because even at my age, I don't even think I realized what was happening. And I was there when I could be. And then I had, my son, and my son at the time was probably four. I mean, that was her world.
Yeah.
Um, I'm like, she good. But when I went to the hospital on Valentine's Day, I realized that it'll never be the same. And 2 days later, it was never the same. She, we pulled the plug and she was gone.
Yeah,
And so,
I saw mine when being a 7-year-old kid, you
mhm,
know, the I tell people the nurses did a real good job, right? Because, my aunt says, well, you got to go to the hospital and see your mother, right?
mhm,
And so you go to the hospital and they're like, oh, you got to put on this suit, right? Because she's in quarantine,
yep,
right? Oh,
mhm,
you got to put on this suit and you got to make sure that you keep this on and all this stuff,
mhm.
right? So I'm thinking like, wow, I'm going to
Yeah,
see my mom and I got
it's
to dress
fancy.
up
Yeah,
and be
yeah,
all like this.
yeah.
Girl, my mom was in the smoking room smoking, smoking her cigarette and they're just
Oh,
sitting there, right?
yeah,
And so my aunt was just like, Liz, why you sitting up here smoking? Da, da, da? Because back then in the 80s, you didn't know what AIDS was, right?
yeah,
So
yeah.
you thinking, okay, I got pneumonia, right?
Mhm,
So, and give or take a couple of days, I'll be in the hospital, then I will go home until the reports start coming out that people were actually dying. Because remember, this was a gay man disease that turned into something else,
yeah.
right? So I know that how that feeling is of the last time because that was the last time. But everyone else, my siblings of them, all they know is that she just never came back,
Mm,
right?
yeah.
And so, you know, grief is different for everybody because my three younger siblings, they don't even really remember her. They know her in pictures,
Mhm,
right? Because they were so young. I remember some things, but barely. And the two oldest, my sister who passed, but my brother, they remember most of the stuff because they had some time with her. When you think about your mom and you think about those moments, do you feel like she was teaching you along the way to prepare you? Because I just felt like, as time went on, when she used to come in and out of the hospital, she knew something. So she wanted to spend time with us as much as she could because she would check herself out, girl, take all the stuff out, and then just come home. And a few days later, we have to take her back in the hospital. Did you
mhm.
feel like your mom was like, you know, preparing you or giving you one of those last moments with you?
Yeah, I definitely think that my mother, reached out for me in ways that she may not have before.
Mm-hmm.
And my mother and I were opposite in that I'm a people person. I love talking to people. I'm outgoing. My mother was not that girl, right? Like she was
Uh-huh.
very kind of quiet and reserved. But I realized that she was trying to be more of a in a setting with me than me in a
Yep.
setting with her, right? So I
Yep.
feel like she was trying to adjust who she was just so she could spend time with me, right? It
Yeah.
was things that she was doing so that she could be around me. And
Correct.
I don't think I realized it until after that she was like, you're going to want to have this time because,
Mm-hmm.
and I think that even though they may not know exactly when, they know eventually it'll happen. And I think that
Mm-hmm.
they try to set us up. And I think even in some of the lessons that I learned the last year that she was here,
Mm-hmm.
me moving into my own place and she like, hey, you need to have this set up. You need
That's
to do
right. That's right.
have this. And I'm like, I don't want to do all that.
Right, right, right.
Like it was my first time doing my taxes, and she was like, "You have to do this. You got to put up this." And I'm like,
Yep.
like it was a lot, but it was a lot that she was putting in place that I didn't see. So after, well, I'm gonna be honest with you, I didn't see it until I came out of the other side of mourning, because mourning and grief is different, right?
Hmm.
So I was out of shock. I couldn't
Yeah,
see it until after that.
yeah.
Yeah, but definitely yes.
And that's what I want to talk about now, because when you go back into your environment
Hmm.
and you see that it's real,
Hmm.
right? Like, okay, mommy's never coming back,
Hmm.
right? And you know what? It's so crazy, Shameka. It's like you go through the motions, you go through the funeral, you go through the wake, you do all of that stuff,
Hmm.
and it just seems so surreal. But it's like a moment that hits you where you just like either you walking in the house or something that you make a mistake and call the number, like something, and then all of a sudden the grief
Yeah,
just
so it crashes
hits.
down. Yep. Yep. Yep.
Did that happen for you where you just like, wow?
Yeah. Yeah. So I think it happened in the way of me realizing that I had a question. If something happened with my son, it was like he had an ear infection or something. And I was like, oh, I need to call mom because I
Hmm.
don't know what to do with this boy. Like it's all this
Yeah.
stuff. And my son, when he was younger, had asthma. And so, it was very like, I was like, oh gosh, like it's good. He gotta breathe. Like and
Yeah.
I realized that I went to call her and I was like, wait a minute,
Ooh,
I can't call my mother.
ooh.
And I realized then, like, wow. And I think even more that first Mother's Day, I realized like when everybody was like, and I think sometimes people bring attention to it when you're not even like in that state, right? But I don't know if for you, it was like when people was
Oh
like,
yeah.
oh, are you like how you gonna do your first Mother's Day? I'm like, what? Like, I'm gonna do it like I
Wasn't
do it
thinking
every year.
about it until.
And then I'm like, wait a minute, I don't have my mother. And then it begins to unfold for you
Hmm.
because sometimes you don't even recognize how it could be for you.
Yeah.
Um, and it gets real. So definitely I feel like it hit me when I realized like I can't call her for what I need because I used to call my mother for everything.
Yeah. So what does grief look like? There are women who are out there who would be listening to this podcast. They lost their mom. I was 7 years old. I'm 45, right? And it's still there, right?
Yeah.
Some people will say, you get over it on your own time. Man, that was 40 years ago. Why are you still worried?
Hmm.
What does that grief look like? How can someone recognize it? Because some people don't even know they in it. They just
Yeah.
believe that they just going through life and getting by and hanging on,
Yeah. So
right?
grief can look like different things to everybody, right? So first of all, we gotta understand that we will never be the person we are after the loss, right? So once we've
Yeah.
lost something, especially like a mother,
Hmm.
whether you had a good relationship with your mother or not, because to think about it, some people didn't have great relationships. And even thinking about the fact that grief is not exclusive to death, and some people lost their mother to the streets, they lost
Yep.
their mothers to substance abuse or things like that.
Hmm.
At the end of the day, grief is different, but grief shows signs of hurt and pain and exhibits in different ways,
Come
right?
on, girl.
So it can be destructive or it can be, I always say it can be destructive or it can be destructive.
Yeah.
Um, and I'm gonna break that down because destructive, I know that when my mother died, I was my grand and I realized especially when my grandmother died, it was destructive. When my mother died, it was destructive, right? So I was participating in things that usually I would have never ever participated in, but because I was trying to hide something inside of
Yep.
myself.
Yep.
When people are grieving, oftentimes they find themselves exhibiting behaviors that they usually wouldn't participate in. That's number
Yes,
one.
Lord. Hmm.
Number two, you are literally isolating yourself because you don't want to have to explain your pain to anybody else. I don't want to have to explain why I'm hurting. You're
Yep.
crying all the time. I don't want to have to explain it. I'm
Hmm.
sad. I want to punch somebody. I don't want to have to explain it. You're angry. You literally feel like life is hopeless.
Yep.
I think that hopeless feeling is something that a lot of people who had relationship with their mothers really feel when they lose them.
Yeah.
because that's their lifeline. That's
Yeah.
their, and you know what? A big feeling that I felt insecure. I
Hmm.
felt like I'm not secured by anything or anybody. Because you know, if you call your mother, and I'm sure it was like this probably with your grandmother, you call your grandmother something happened, she gonna go to war for you.
Yeah, she is.
She not gonna play about you. And
No.
you lose that figure, you lose that security.
Yep.
I lost that security that I have, that no matter if nobody else in this world loves me, I
I
know
know.
that
That's
my
right.
mother and my grandmother love me. And I
Oh,
lost that. I lost that.
it's so crazy because even, losing my mom at such a young age, it's like my grandmother stepped in there, right? And I tell people, even though she didn't want the job, she did it anyway with all of us. Um, but also when she passed, it was more like, the same thing. Like that was kind of like the lifeline there.
Yeah.
But I was much older. But one thing she did do was, she was calling and she called me because I was here in Atlanta. And she said, "Hey, why don't you just come see me? See if you can get on that plane or the bus and come see me." And so I did because I was like, okay, they said that, she was sick. She never told us what was wrong. So we don't even know how she died, right? And so, I get there and she just wanted to watch movies and she just wanted to talk, right? And she just wanted to tell me how proud she was. And for some reason, I wanted to hang out with my friends because this was a time, I'm from New York. This was a time where I'm like, oh, I get to see my friends, I get to do this and that. But something told me to just stay. And I tell you, girl, for 12 hours straight, we were sleeping, watching movies, waking up because I knew she knew
Mhm.
that, this was it. And so when she transitioned, I was kind of at peace with that because I had my time with my mom. I wouldn't say it was more anger, but it was the acting out. You know why? Because even when I got married, Shameka, and people don't believe me, I never called my mother-in-law mom. I never called my father-in-law dad because I had that thing, you not my mother and you
Mhm.
not my father. And those words didn't belong to you. You get what
Mhm.
I'm saying?
Yeah.
And nobody could understand that. And they thought it was disrespectful. And I'm like, I don't even know how I never said those words.
Mhm.
You get what I'm saying?
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's like you trying to make me do something. One, I never did, right? And then two, I feel it don't belong to you. But
Yeah.
now I know it was a part of my grief. But back then it was, me acting out. But it was just like you you embody that kind of thing where you start to live with it, right? Because I was just like, well, that lady ain't my mother. I ain't calling her
Yeah.
that.
I
You, you
understand.
know what I'm saying? Like, because to me, that was the sacred thing that got lost. You
Yeah.
understand?
That you didn't get to experience. Yeah, as
Exactly.
fully as you really. So it was like unfair. It's like, what I realized is grief can even make you bitter, or it can make you better.
That is correct.
And for some of us, the bitterness is how we get to the better. And it's
Correct.
unfortunate, but we have to learn in our own time, that the bitterness is not necessarily something we need in order to heal. We don't
Right.
have to be bitter, but the bitter comes from anger. It comes from anger. It comes from unfairness. It comes
Yep.
from why me,
Yep.
why
And
mine.
that's the thing I want people to hear because it wasn't like I was trying to be that way. Like it was just embedded in me because there was nobody else around that I had to say those words to until I got into a relationship. Does that make sense? Because
Mhm.
everybody else was aunt, cousin, right?
Mhm.
A friend, this, that. So you could say, oh, hey, Aunt Janie, da da da, all this stuff, uncle, this, that, right?
Mhm.
But when you are in a romantic relationship and you marry somebody, and now this whole concept of family comes, you're like, wait a minute.
Mhm.
It's like, in my experience, it's like, wait a minute. And it
Mhm.
was like, oh, come with me to, get nails done, do this. And I would say no,
Mhm.
because I wasn't used to that and I didn't want to do that.
I feel like I understand totally. I feel, I am married and with my mother-in-law, it took me, I call her mine now, but it was hard. But I think the most intense kind of feeling that I feel is with my spiritual mother, right?
Hmm.
And I know that God gave me to her and
Yeah,
her to me. So when I talk to her, you know, I realized that I didn't know how to approach her, right? Even when we're talking, she's like, you can call me whenever you need me. And I'm like, and I think it's because also I hadn't had my mother in so long that I'm like,
hmm,
I hadn't had anybody care for me in that way. So I think it's
that's what
also
it
a
is.
trust thing, right?
That's what it is.
I have not had anybody that has held and if we're being real, a lot of times when you lose somebody like your mother or anybody really, you really find out who people really are.
Come on.
And because people have disappointed you in that grief process,
Yep.
what happens is you don't feel secure really with anybody. So
Hmm.
now you got trust issues because
Yep.
your security system is gone. Your security
Hmm.
system was your mother, your grandmother, whoever held you down. And now you
Hmm.
don't have that. So now you're either searching for that
Hmm.
or somebody has been presented, but you don't care. And you like, no, no,
Hmm.
because
Hmm.
I can't do that. Because you know why? I never want to feel that pain again.
100%.
Never.
And I also felt like it was cheating. Like, why? You know what I'm saying? Like, I can't give you this special gift that I gave her because it was hers. You get what I'm saying? And it's
I
like,
definitely get it.
but that was
It's
my
sacred, yeah.
mind back then within the grief. And that's what I would tell, the women listening to this. It's like your mind is going to tell you things and you are going to feel a certain way. But what you got to understand about grief, and Shamika just said it, you're going to have anger and
Mhm.
you don't know how that thing is going to manifest. You're
Mhm.
going to have sadness. You're going to be confused. You're going to feel like, you can't trust anybody.
Mhm.
You're going to be bringing it up over and over and over again. You're going to
Yeah.
sound like you're a broken record. You're going to do all of that
Yeah.
because you're in that stage of grief. And
Mhm.
it's okay to be there, but you have to figure out how to come through, which is what I want to talk about because we can't spend our lives there. We have to figure out how we move on. For me, it was not successful because we're not married anymore, right? Because I was never taught. I didn't even know I was grieving. That's the thing. I just knew now you got to fend for yourself, do what you need to do for you, and
Mhm.
that's it. Don't listen to nobody. Don't sit there. People tell you they love you, this, that. I don't want to hear none of that, right?
Mhm.
Because and I told a friend this the other day. I said, the people you love leave you. And so she always says to me, she's like, I know you think I'm gonna leave you. And I was like, oh man, I must have affected her somehow because she keeps reassuring me that she's gonna stay. And what I would tell her is I don't feel like that now, but back then that was my experience,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
And that grief is what I felt because in my mind, everybody that I loved and attached to somehow went away.
Mhm.
You see what I'm saying?
Mhm.
So you have to be able to come through that. Now, Shamika, how do we get on that path? Once we recognize that we are in grief, how do we start to take those steps?
Yeah, so I think you got to check yourself, right? You
Mm,
got to check yourself. There is no assessment without accountability. You
mm.
have to hold yourself accountable. Um, Grief can manifest in a lot of ways, and recently I've really seen how it can affect even your physical body.
Yes.
A friend of mine actually, she lost the feeling in her legs. because
Wow.
she wasn't caring for her body. You know, she wasn't caring because you lose the hope, you lose the will to want to do anything, right? Because you
Hmm.
lost one of the most important parts of you. So checking yourself, understanding your own behaviors. But part of that is also having people in your circle who allow you to, if you want to talk about this 50 times, them
Yeah.
not saying, okay, you should be over it by now.
Hmm.
Like
Hmm.
that's not okay. You have to check your circle. And I tell people all the time, if you're talking to people who be like, you should get over it, they really don't know anything anyway. Because grief is not something you get over, it's something you get through.
Come on.
It will never stop.
Come on.
If the intensity may change, but it's not going to stop. A
Hmm.
smell, a thought, a memory, anything can bring it back.
Music,
But you have
everything.
to be able to be so okay with feeling your feelings. And I think, especially with women, especially with Black women, we stop our feelings because we feel like if we're not the strong one, we're weak.
Correct.
And we
Correct.
have to stop feeling like we're not allowed to be uh, quote unquote weak without feeling like we have to give a reason,
But
right?
Shameka, we got to go back to work. We got kids. We got
Yep,
to do all this stuff.
yep.
We're in a relationship that we kind of sort of like, or we married, but it's okay now. But,
Mm-hmm,
now that I'm in my grief, my life has changed. And
mm-hmm,
I know I'm different with my kids. I know I'm different with my mate. I know that I'm going through this,
mm-hmm,
but I feel I also blame myself because I'm putting them through something. So I
mm-hmm,
don't say nothing. You get what I'm
mm-hmm.
saying?
Yeah.
Because if I do say something, my son or daughter is looking at me crying, and all of a sudden they feel like they got to take care of me and they worried about me. So I got to hurry up.
Mm-hmm. Get
You know what
yourself
I'm
together.
saying? And
Yeah.
get myself together for them. And then it's not about me anymore. So
Yeah.
it's like,
But that's unhealthy. And let me tell you why it's unhealthy. It's unhealthy that we feel like, and let me just be very honest with you, we do our children and the people around us a disservice by trying to be strong through our weakest moments.
thank you.
Because if we don't begin to show our children, to show our grandchildren or whoever else that we also feel, they will not know how to deal with trouble.
True.
Because you got to think about it. At some point, they're not going to have you. And are we teaching our children a generation of I gotta be strong? Because what happens is when we gotta be strong, we no longer have an outlet to really show what we're feeling. And then we're talking about mental breakdowns, we're talking about
Right.
violence, we're talking about outbursts, we're talking about physical problems in our body
Correct.
because we won't let it out. It's okay that you're never going to be the same. Losing someone so significant in your life is trauma.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
What
Mm-hmm.
would they tell you about trauma? You have to work through it. Whether
Yeah.
it's you have to go to therapy, you have to get a coach, you got to do whatever you need to do. You need to start talking about it because at the end of the day, the only way that you're going to get through it is by working through it.
Yeah.
You being silent about how you're feeling. If you're feeling like I need to express this, you need to be able to do this regardless of who's around. We got to get back to the things that we need to do. But at the end of the day, that doesn't mean that we silence how we feel because we have to do that.
Absolutely.
And
So
we
tell
have
us
to give
about
ourselves room to do that.
so tell us about your organization and what you do.
Yeah. So Those Without Mothers was created because I realized that when I lost my mother, I had no community. A lot of the people when I lost my mother had their mothers, right? And no
Mm-hmm.
shame to them. I had a great support system, but then I also realized that they didn't understand what I was saying. They didn't understand Mother's Day, why I closed all the blinds, why I shut all the lights off, why I was like, please don't talk to me. You know, they didn't understand. And then one of my other friends, she lost her mother, and we became a community for one another. And then if somebody else lost their mother, and then it was like that. But I realized how important and essential it is in this healing process to be able to talk to other people who have experienced what I experienced.
Mm-hmm.
Even when I talk to people who have lost their mothers to the streets, I
Yeah.
realize that they have a loss that I can still relate to in some type of way. because
Right.
they're missing the relationship. They're
Mm-hmm.
missing a missing link to their lives. And
Mm-hmm.
community is helpful when you're grieving because you don't feel like you're by yourself. That hopeless feeling feels less hopeless when you feel like you got somebody that can identify with how you feel. And so those are our
100%.
mothers is a community. It's
Absolutely.
we're not just all sad and all that time. That's not what it is. Because I think sometimes people be like, oh, so y'all just be talking about like
Bleeding on each other all day. No.
no, but we be going bowling, we be playing
Yep.
cards. But we also allow each other the space to, if they call, we have something called healing partners.
Mm-hmm.
So everybody has a partner. If
Mm-hmm.
you're not feeling your best, call your healing partner because
Correct.
you need somebody who can hold you accountable and vice versa.
Correct.
But then also you have a community. Hey, we know Mother's Day is hard. I have an annual brunch every year
That's right.
because I want everybody to feel like you're not by yourself. I have
Mm-hmm.
different types of activities. We have support groups, holidays. We always have something. We always do stuff. If you go on our website, we have a place you subscribe so we can get to know what your mother's birthday or your mother's
Yeah.
death date because we want to reach out to you and see how you're doing. So we want to make sure that you don't feel by yourself. And so
Mm-hmm.
that's really what it is. And then one of the things that helped me in my grief was being a grief, me finding a grief coach. And so I became a grief coach for my community because
Mm-hmm.
I need my people to know that hey, we got everything we need among us.
Right.
Because it
Right.
just helps when you can, and I'm sure you can attest to this,
Oh yeah.
easier to talk to somebody who understands your plight, right?
Absolutely.
Just like, oh,
Absolutely.
well, I'm going outside with my mother today. Like,
Mm-hmm.
yeah,
It also helps you understand, that it is day by day, but every day doesn't have to be a sad day and every day doesn't have to be, a bleeding day.
yeah,
And that's why you have the community, because what
yeah.
the community does, it helps you get through that where they just like, hey girl, come on, we're gonna go bowling or whatever, because
Yep.
starting next month,
Mm-hmm.
when the holidays start,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
That's when it all,
Yep.
starts to happen
It gets dark.
where you
Yep.
ain't got no place to go for Thanksgiving anymore because your
Yep.
mom used to do the cooking. You don't have no place to go for Christmas. Christmas is not the same.
Yep.
And then you look around and you find out that, you're basically by yourself and everybody else with their family. And they like, oh, you can come over. It's like, yeah,
But I don't
but
want to be a second thought, right?
yeah,
And that's sometimes what it feel
right?
like, oh, you can come over like a plus one. What? I don't want your
Yeah,
pennies. I don't want that.
right. And but that's what it feels like. But they genuine and and
Yeah.
they want you to come.
Yeah.
But you want that home feeling where it's like, Mama, Mommy, what you cook? And did you put my favorite thing inside
Exactly.
this my macaroni and cheese. You got my pan ready? Cause
Mhm.
I'm gonna take this home. Like
Exactly.
all of that. You know what
Yeah.
I'm saying? Where
Yeah.
now it's just like, oh, Miss Such and Such, whatever you got, I know it tastes good.
Yeah. I'll take it.
It's like you know what I'm saying?
Yep.
It's like a dividing line there, and then that becomes your life. But how do you make the best out of that,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yeah.
Because you can still move through it. It just looks a little different.
Exactly. And you hit the nail on the head. That's how you move through it. You have to remember that I think some of us get caught up in I wanted to be how it used to be.
Yeah,
And like I
I
stated,
did for a long time.
and like I stated, I think if a lot of us would heal, not quicker, but we would move through it a little bit more gracefully if we understood that we can't be that person.
Yeah,
It won't be the same.
I was trying to force my husband to do exactly that. Like I wanted everybody at the house and I would want
Mhm.
to cook and do. And he like, oh, we don't have a lot of people at the house. And I don't want all this. And I'm up there like, what you talking about? Like, because it was the feeling that
Mhm.
that I wanted to generate. And then over time, it was just like, uh, I
Yeah.
don't, you know what I'm saying? Like,
Yep.
I don't feel the same, but I said all that to say we know it's not the same. We
Mhm.
know it's going to be different. And a couple of times it's going to be hard. Yes, you're going to be a guest at someone's house.
Mhm.
It could be your aunt, your uncle, this, that, but you have the opportunity to still live your life because that person gave you life.
Mhm.
And now it's your opportunity to tell their story,
Mhm.
show them through you the
Yeah, create
love
your own traditions.
and
Yeah.
create your own traditions and do
Yep.
so many other things because that's what they wanted for you.
Yeah.
Don't matter if they was in the streets or anything like that. You never know their story, but
Mhm.
what you know for sure is that they did the best that they could with what they had,
Absolutely.
you know?
Absolutely.
So how
Yeah.
can we follow you?
Sure, you can follow me at Those Without Mothers on Facebook or Instagram. Also, I'm on Instagram, Shameka Speaks. And also my thosewithoutmothers.org is our website. So if you want to connect with us there, be a subscriber, if you want to be a part of our community, we'd love to have you. We also have a private Facebook group for Those Without Mothers for we have a little bit of private conversation that keeps it a little bit more confidential so people feel that there's a safe space.
Yeah.
I do hold grief support groups, usually twice a month, both hybrid, so in person and online.
Mhm.
And so if you want to connect, I'm a grief coach, and you can always go to fromgriefwithloveaswell.com and check it out.
Shamika, thank you so much for being here. I really enjoyed this conversation.
I did.
Any last thoughts?
I would say just enjoy your life. Don't die with your loved one.
Come
Um,
on,
I
girl.
think that sometimes we die with them, and that is not what
Mm,
they gave you life for. The person that you lost, whether to death or to life, did not bring you here for you to die with them. And
mm.
so continue to live your life as if they were here, because you still have things to do. If you still have breath, you still have things on this earth to do. So I know it feels hopeless sometimes, but get your hope out of the fact that you're still here.
Wow, I love that.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. And we'll
Thank you.
definitely be in touch, okay?
All right. Thank you so much.
All right, have a good night.
You too.